Okay. A man is not a financial plan. Drop the mic. Let me say it again. A man is not a financial plan. And it's not because Prince Charming doesn't exist. I'm still a believer. It's because if we, as women, don't empower ourselves with the knowledge and the confidence to make our own financial decisions, we're robbing ourselves of that opportunity. We're sabotaging ourselves and we're sabotaging our futures. And it's up to us individually and in our many roles in the home and in the community to change that message. Ladies in the audience, how many of you have been told, "Darling, you are so pretty. I hope you marry well"? I was. And that's fine, right? I mean, it's socially acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that statement. But what that statement is really saying is pass the buck to somebody else who can do a better job managing your life than you can. That's what that's really saying. But by passing the buck in this socially acceptable way, we're again robbing ourselves of the opportunity not only to make financial decisions, but to make decisions about our families and our careers. Because like it or not, all of those aspects of our life are intertwined with our finances. Once we begin to tell ourselves that narrative that we are not in control of our finances, we open the door for somebody else to tell a different narrative. We open the door for somebody else to tell us how to control our lives. When we passively say, "I can't," we let that seep into our personality, we let it seep into our self-confidence, our self-reliance, and our self-image. Now you might say, that's a stretch. That girl is being way too dramatic about this. But I'm not, because if you think about it, all of the decisions that we make, or most anyway, are intertwined with finance. The house that you live in, the job that you choose, the career that you choose, the neighborhood that you live in, whether or not you want to expand your family, all of those decisions have financial consequences. And because this has such broad impact, this message is true for women of all ages and all economic backgrounds. But today I want to talk about this from my perspective, and that is the perspective of, allergies. That's the perspective of a mother, a daughter, a sister, a friend, a business owner, and a financial professional. And what I've observed in each of those roles over the past several years is that believing that a man is a financial plan, or believing that you should or need to subordinate your financial control to somebody else, is the number one cause of what I call the bag lady syndrome. I went through, if you look up images for the bag lady, there are some that are, they're all depressing, but this one, I tried to find one that, I don't know, there's a lot. Anyway, okay, so what is the bag lady syndrome? What is the bag lady syndrome? It is the utterly paralyzing fear that you will someday have to make some financial decision on your own and you'll be unable to. It's the utterly paralyzing fear that you will be destitute, on the side of the road, eating cat food, literally the bag lady. I've heard it said a million different ways. And that is the exact phrase that I hear from my clients, women just like you and just like me, who hit a bump in the road. Whether it's a divorce or it's a death in the family, their life is upended, and they are scared to death that they're going to have to make a financial decision, and they're scared. They're scared that they're going to become the bag lady. So again, I'll ask you in the audience, who here knows somebody whose spouse has died suddenly? Everybody, right? Who here knows somebody who's been through a really nasty divorce, or just a divorce? Any divorce, doesn't even need to be nasty. They're all bumps. Okay. So this story is going to sound pretty familiar to all of you then. Several years ago, a woman came into my office for help with financial aspects around a divorce. She was in her early 50s. She had been married for 23 years or so, and her husband was leaving her for the 20-year younger female, etc. Same old story. In this case, though, there were also several lawsuits involved, and there were also hundreds of thousands of back taxes that were due that she had due that she didn't realize were there. From her perspective, she was living the high life. She had the big house, she had the club memberships, the gym memberships, the big vacations, the whole bit. So from her perspective, everything was fine. It was my fantastic job, after looking over all the numbers, to explain to her that the life that they had been living was literally based in sand. that it was an illusion. And this was a surprise to her. She assumed that because she had played the role of the perfect corporate wife, and she had assumed that because she had spent enough hours at the gym and that the kids were fed and everybody was healthy, that everything was fine. But in reality, she assumed and she never asked. And one thing that I've learned over and over again over the past several years is that assumptions are absolutely the mother of all massive screw-ups that are out there. It's very true. And this case is no different. She assumed and she didn't ask. So I met with her several times over the course of the next several months. And as I got to know her better and see how genuinely astute she really was and felt more comfortable with her, I asked, why didn't you ask? Why didn't you dig a little bit deeper, even casually, into what was going on with the finances, especially when you started to feel like things were going south? Why didn't you ask? Were you afraid that he would say no? Were you afraid that he would say it's none of your business? Or that he would say you're stupid or laugh at you? Were you afraid that you'd be unattractive or somehow it would create a conflict? Any of those things. And her answer, not surprisingly, was all of the above. She had become so conditioned to thinking that these topics were not her concern. She was so used to being told, don't worry your pretty little head about that she took that pretty head and she stuck it right back in the sand again. She literally, it wasn't just that she lost confidence in her financial abilities, it was even worse. She had actually mentally relinquished financial control of her life. I know that sounds deep. And I mean, it was her money too. It was her family. It was her future. She never asked, she just assumed. And she would say to me over and over again, and it was so upsetting to hear, she'd say, I am so stupid where money is concerned. And I hear that so frequently. And it just wasn't true. She was very, very bright. She just chose not to stay informed. She chose not to be aware. And in doing so, she silently let someone else take that position her for financial ruin. And that's exactly what you would have expected. So the story ended as you expect. The divorce went through. Kids are fine. They kept moving on. And unfortunately, my client was left with a pretty solid financial mess that we've spent the last few years trying to fix. And the only upside of it is that she is now much more financially aware than she was all those years ago. Now, is it surprising that when her husband left, that she doubted herself? No, it's completely fair. Of course she's going to doubt herself. Is it surprising that that self-doubt fed on itself when her life was upended? No, not at all. Completely fair. So I wasn't at all surprised when she said to me, I am scared to death of being a bag lady. Now, I'm sure you all have similar stories. This isn't a surprise. In fact, it's practically a cliche. It's unfortunate, but it's true. And what I find the most amazing is that with all the strides that women have made over the past decades, socially, politically, professionally, our confidence where money is concerned has barely edged up. There's plenty of studies to show it. Our confidence has barely moved. And to be fair, fear and doubt are absolutely okay. Fear and doubt are necessary. They're important when they motivate, but they can also be absolutely paralyzing. And the only one that can stomp out that fear, whether it's by asking questions, being aware, or demanding information, is you. It's never too late in the game to take the reins yourself, or, when it's appropriate, to ask to share the reins with a partner. Staying informed and aware is imperative to avoiding the bag lady syndrome. Wow, okay. So you might be saying, this is depressing. Why did I come back from lunch for this? Is she telling me I shouldn't get married, that I shouldn't trust my husband, that the bad guys really are out to get me? No, I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is knowledge is power. Does anybody here remember G.I. Joe? From the 1980s cartoon fame? Does anybody remember what his motto or message was? Anybody? Okay, now I know. And knowing is half the battle, right? That was G.I. Joe. I used to watch a lot of G.I. Joe. I had friends with brothers. So, does anybody remember Barbie's motto? She doesn't have one. It's time to change the message. So, if we want a different vision, vision is the second component of kicking the bag lady syndrome. So I have another story for you. This one is a little bit more positive. Okay, so I've been working with a woman on her financial plan for several years. And she would come in, let me give you a little background. She is divorced and remarried, has 3 successful grown children. She's successful in her career. She's professionally respected in the community, just an overall wonderful person. But she was miserable, absolutely miserable. She had worked for the same company for 20 plus years, and it seemed as though that company did everything that they could to make her miserable, to undermine her, and to make her, basically to push her to the point where she just, wherever it was that was going to be her breaking point. And she was miserable. So she would come to my office for our meetings, and she would cry, and I would cry, and we would cry together. And then I would say to her, why don't you just leave? You have the skills, you have the connections, you have the opportunities. Why don't you leave? Why don't you start your own thing, move to a different company? There's lots of opportunities out there for you. And she would say, what if I fail? She was scared to death of failure. She said, I might be miserable, but this misery that I know is better than the misery that I don't know. I'm so afraid that I might fail. So if you picture this is like a lot of folks that you know. For 20 plus years, she put her head down. She worked, she went to work, she raised her kids, she did exactly what she was supposed to do. She couldn't even let herself imagine another future because she was playing the role that she needed to play. But it was time. So we discussed it, and she started to make a plan. She looked at her various weaknesses and strengths. She sought out outside guidance. We identified and managed various risks. She created a timeline. And little by little, as we'd meet to discuss her evolving plan, you could see she was getting happier, stronger backbone, straighter backbone, and it was just fantastic. And we stopped crying together. And the day that she opened her business, the light in her eye was never brighter than I had ever seen it. And it was just fantastic. So what's the message from that story? Quit your job and get a small business loan, right? That's it. No. It is that plans inspire vision. Hopefully that's the next slide. Yes. So this lady always possessed the appropriate professional skills. She had the skills, she had the connections, but she was so afraid of failing and of being the bag lady that she was unwilling or unable to take that chance. She couldn't see anything else. She let her employers define her path. And once she started making a plan and addressing any of the weaknesses that came out of that, her confidence soared and her vision took shape. Having a vision and a plan, whether it's yours or one that you craft with a partner, is essential to kicking the bag lady syndrome. And I know the whole idea of writing down a plan sounds really trite and really boring, because plan is a 4-letter word, of course. So I have another question, actually, and that is, who out there has actually been asked to put together a 5-year plan? Either when you graduated from college, okay, oh, awesome, a lot of people, this is a good audience. Okay, I was asked to do that when I graduated from college. And I did. I mean, I didn't just do it. My type A self went all at it. I had it all figured out. And when I look back at it, it's comical, because the plan that I put together back then looks nothing like the life that I live right now. Nothing like it. But what I did not do is toss the concept of that plan out the window when life threw me curveballs. I used that plan as a point of reference to figure out, where am I now and where do I want to be, and to help get from point A to point B. And what I've learned many times over from crafting, recrafting, and recreating my own plan, and what I've observed professionally from other women who have done the exact same thing, is that having a plan, like having knowledge, is essential. It is half the battle. Having a plan helps you to deal with life's surprises. It helps you to make changes and to pivot when necessary. Without a plan, it's like you're trying to walk through pluff mud. When you have a plan, you have visibility, and you're better able to change without losing focus of your goals. It also allows you to be willing to make changes and to take chances, which allows you to add new skills and new people and new dimensions to your path. It allows you to ask yourself the question, what if? And that is what avoiding the bag lady syndrome and not assuming that a man is a financial plan is all about. It's being able to ask, what if, without fear of what that answer might be. It's saying, I am the plan, and I've got this. The end.